Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome to yet another Coolset webinar, and welcome to yet another UDR webinar from Coolset. As you know, we're here today with myself and Elisavet, but also for those that have attended our previous webinars, know that there is always something happening with IT issues. So Elisavet is logging in remotely today, and she was just in the call with me, and then decided to mute her or to blur her background, and now she's not able to log in anymore. So, well, luckily I'm kicking off the webinar anyways, and I'll do the first few slides. So hopefully in the next 1 or 2 minutes, she will join us again. Yeah, in the meantime, just a very quick introduction. I think most of you have been following the news over the last week, have been seeing kind of the news around a potential EUDR delay, but also might have been kind of confused about what it all means and what do we know for sure and what's kind of still a big question mark. And that's also what we're here to discuss today. I see Elisavet joined us. Perfect. So I think without further ado, we can kick off today's session. And I'm actually quite excited to kind of put together all of our thoughts. Oh, no sound. Can other people hear me? I'm seeing two people saying that they cannot hear me. Okay. Okay, good. At least there. I was already worried that we have more technical issues today, but no. Okay, then I recommend. Then I think the other people will figure out how to get me on their laptop or on their computer. Okay. Well, moving on to the first slides of the agenda. So, what are we talking about today? So, we'll have a bit of a recap just for the people that are a bit less familiar with the UDR. Then we'll talk about the catalyst. So, what kicked this all off? Spoiler: it was a letter. Then the context, what it means today, understanding the politics, your options, of course, going forward. I think that's an important one in this kind of time of uncertainty. And as always, we'll have a Q&A where we'll answer all of your questions. Once again, please put your questions in the Q&A below. And then you'll see the question box on the bottom right, and that will allow you to put the questions in, and we can put them on the screen, and we can answer them for everyone to see. I'm seeing in the comments a couple of people are saying they cannot hear me, and one person is saying that there's no slides. I don't know if this is on my end or if this is something that the platform is doing wrong. Okay, I'm seeing conflicting information. Some people are saying it's working, some people are saying it's not working. I think for now I'm going to continue. Hopefully, they find out what is causing it. And if there's any other issues, also keep in mind that we will share the recording afterwards for those that had some technical issues today. First, a poll to start off today's sessions. What concerns you most about the proposed UDR delay? First option: waste and investments, unclear timelines, stricter enforcement later, supplier confusion, or other. Let's see what people are saying. Oh, there goes my lights. It is. What concerns you most about the proposed UDR delay? So I think most are saying it's an unclear timeline. I agree with this. So another spoiler, but the UDR has already been delayed once before in 2024, and now they're proposing a delay again. So it's kind of this, political ping pong of deadlines, and I think that is causing a lot of confusion. Also here at Coolset, we spent the last 6 months working on EUDR, only for it to be all put into question by the legislators in Brussels. So good to have that confirmed. A bit of a recap, and for this, I'm going to give the word to Elisavet. Hopefully, she is able to be heard by all of you, and then she'll take you on those slides.
Jasper, can you confirm that you can hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Thank you. All right. So, for anyone that has joined the UDR discussions recently, we will start with a short recap, as Jasper said, and what timelines we already know. So, if you can change the slide. the EU deforestation regulation requires that products derived from 7 commodities, namely cattle, cocoa, coffee, palm oil, rubber, soy, and timber, cannot be imported, produced, manufactured, sold, or exported from the EU without ensuring that the materials are deforestation free, legal, and also accompanied by a due diligence statement that proves this compliance. Essentially, this includes introducing some very well curated data collection processes, risk assessment, mitigation processes, and all these aim at addressing at least this 10% of deforestation that is caused by EU production, consumption, and export. And the regulation is supposed, as we know it now, to be enforced for large and medium companies from the 30th of this December, while small and micro enterprises got 6 months before enforcement happens for them. And EUDR came strong when it was first introduced. However, very quickly things turned political, with specific parties advocating from last year for specific simplifications and delays, and we're going to go through them. And as we know it, and Jasper just mentioned also, a delay was also enforced. And if we go to the next slide, we can also see a small timeline, so we can place this chronologically better in our minds. So EUDR entered into force on June 29th of 2023. Actually, this is quite a couple of years ago now, where the law was adopted by the EU and published in the official journal of the EU as well. And initially the enforcement was meant for 30th of December of 2024. However, less than 1 month before enforcement was supposed to happen, the EU announced a 12-month postponement. And this has led to the timeline as we know it now, with large and medium enterprises needed to comply in just 3 months from now, and then 6 months after December for the smaller companies. So that's in a nutshell how we are today. And before we move on with deep diving into the catalyst, we have one more question for you in the next slide, which is, where is your company today with the EUDR preparations? Because we see that companies have already started preparing. So we're keen to hear more about how you have been going with this. Like, have you already started? Are you in the middle of the preparations? Maybe you're already waiting. So already we start seeing a little bit of a trend with most of the people responding that you're either in early planning or already advanced actually with the preparations, which frankly, it makes total sense considering that we are just a couple of months before enforcement. And honestly, I think that's nice to hear, because it means that companies are preparing and are ready to tackle the regulation if nothing happens in the end. So thank you very much for your votes on this. And now we're gonna start deep diving into the well-known letter that triggered this political discussion. So the catalyst that entered the uncertainty era. So last week on Tuesday, actually, the media and the EU released a letter written by the Commissioner Jessica Roswell, who is affiliated with the EPP actually, and is well connected to the mission of leading the work on protecting our natural world and circular economy in the EU, where she notified the Parliament's Environment Committee Chair Antonio De Caro and the Danish presidency of the intention to delay the enforcement of the regulation by 1 year more. In this letter, she explicitly focuses on the plausible inability of the Commission to deliver an IT system that can handle the requirements. And of course, that this would create more uncertainty for the authorities and for the stakeholders that have to comply essentially. Of course, this has a lot of reactions triggered in the world of compliance, and many people have expressed their views. But even though this is just a letter, and not even an official proposal yet, we saw that people took it like very seriously and got really concerned. And that is because of a specific piece of text, in our opinion, in this letter, which is that the letter clearly states that the Commission is considering the postponement. So it didn't say herself, it didn't say a specific political party, but it does say the Commission is considering the postponement. This means that it is highly unlikely that Roswell would just proceed with such a big statement if there had not been a whole discussion behind this. Of course, this is not public information, but considering the role of EU Commission in drafting and implementing the regulation, this signals that the letter was just the output of some serious discussions and arguments behind closed doors, in our opinion, of course. Now, if we move a little bit more, I think it's very important that we spend some time to understand the background and some other milestones that happened before that letter was published that has led us to the current state. So in the next slide, we have an overview of this background, and we start with the baseline information, which was that already 1 year ago, there was the delay and some other efforts of simplification that didn't go through. And the idea of the 1 year delay last year was to give companies more time to prepare, which was a fair point for many companies, as indeed we saw that many of the companies were inactive on EUDR until then, not all of them, of course. Since the EUDR postponement, the EU has announced not 1, but 6 omnibuses on the table. And for those who are not familiar with the term omnibus, because this is not that much a discussion around EUDR, omnibus refers to EU packages that claim to reduce the volume and complexity of the reporting requirements for EU businesses with the aim of boosting EU competitiveness. And these omnibuses are aiming at topics from sustainability, like we saw, for example, CSRD, CSDDD, and EU taxonomy being included in the first one, but also we expect to see packages in investments, agriculture, chemicals, even defense. And so far, EUDR has not been mentioned as part of these packages. However, we see a clear relationship between the agriculture and environmental omnibus and EUDR, which Jasper will spend a little bit more time on later. And when looking back at the events from last year, and we cannot ignore all the political changes that have happened in between, for example, Trump's presidency and all the geopolitical tensions from which EU has lived, of course, the consequences. And we believe that this has caused the current Commission to pivot the tone from succeeding through regulation and corporate responsibility to simplification and business relief and business as usual. Lastly, we need to consider that the latest trade lobbying events that we have seen between the EU and specific countries like the US, Indonesia, and Malaysia. We're going to deep dive in another slide about them, but in a nutshell, we see 3 countries that are lobbying very hard against EUDR, claiming that this will make trade more difficult and that it will hurt the economy and the relationships between these 2 countries. Now, if we move on, apart from the highlights that we mentioned already, also back in May, we saw a group of 11 countries, which was led particularly by Austria and Luxembourg, that demanded that the EU Commission would simplify the rules further and also urged for the delay of the application again. Their argument practically was that the requirements will almost be impossible to implement and that they believe that they are disproportionate to the regulation's objectives. And this was published in specific papers and media, of course, all around the world. They demanded also, again, some exceptions in regards to no-risk category, which I wanted to remind you at this point that this has already been rejected and criticized for violating the World Trade Organization rules. So, of course, this signal that there is a shift already from May, from business as usual to from sustainability to business as usual, also on EUDR. Now, a couple of months afterwards, in July, we're going to see in the next slide that we also saw another wave of opposition, this time with 18 agricultural ministers, which were expressing again some views on the delay and simplifications. Very similar arguments, and they argued that the EUDR will add, I quote, excessive and redundant due diligence requirements, which should be removed in countries where agricultural expansion is not significantly reducing the forest area. of course, there has been no mention of how is it possible to monitor that deforestation will not happen in this country. So we do see a lot of opposition, but we do not see that many solutions as to how to make this a fair regulation if we start excluding specific countries. What is interesting with this event is that with regulations like CSRD, CSDD, etc., most of the discussions have been led by Northern and Scandinavian countries, while this time we see a lot of the South and East countries also being active in the discussions. For example, we see that Germany or France, Spain were not part of this discussion, but we see many other countries being involved. So what we don't see as a last step from this event, what we don't see from this discussion is how simplifying or delaying the regulation will not impact the overall goal of the regulation in the end. Now, this brings us to September, where we, of course, after summary session, if you move to the next slide, yes, exactly, where after the summary session, we received the Roswell's letter, and we already went through the in and outs of the letter, but it is important to mention that critics argue that the technical delay as an argument is not strong enough, and they really feel that there are trade links involved to the decision as well, and other political influences as well. And the approach of using the IT system as the reason for this backtrack has raised, of course, a lot of concerns towards the credibility and trustworthiness of the EU's word, practically. And lastly, the critics also mentioned that this 2-year delay back-to-back also erodes the EU climate landscape credibility, of course. Now, moving on, it is also very, very important to speak of these trade links that we mentioned here and there, because we cannot avoid how international trade discussions could have potentially influenced these developments. Firstly, a couple of weeks ago, we saw a public announcement from the White House where the US claims almost that they have already agreed with the EU that the US will not be affected by EUDR in return for some favorable terms over tariffs. And there was a somewhat internal joke around in the social media, like LinkedIn, where EU secured free tariff lobster, for example. So that's why we're trading our EUDR for sometimes. And at the same time, almost coincidentally, we also saw Indonesia, who has been lobbying against EUDR quite strongly, advocating that the trade between the two countries will be affected heavily on EUDR. At the same time, we saw that EU and Indonesia accepted a specific trade deal, which is so-called comprehensive CEPA, is like a comprehensive economic partnership agreement, which aims at making barrier-free trade between the two countries. And of course, EUDR would be a blocker on this agreement. Of course, it's interesting to mention here for anyone that is not aware that Indonesia is a very close partner on 5, I think, out of the 7 commodities with high trades of palm oil, rubber, cocoa, coffee, and timber. And therefore, many argue that the so-called technical delay is not that technical after all, but influenced by all these political events that we went through just now. Now, in the next slide, of course, it is important to mention that the delay is not a done deal. We should see the other view where, for example, a few days after the letter, the Vice President of the EU Commission, Teresa Ribera, who is affiliated with the S&D party, started expressing some opposing views on EUDR developments. She did mention that the IT issues are not unreal. However, she did recognize that there are ways to fix the problems without killing the regulation for 1 more year, and that their approach feels like killing someone because of sickness instead of treating it essentially. So we do see a division in the political landscape, and it needs to be gapped in one or the other direction for us to know how we continue from now on. And lastly, she does advocate for ensuring that the goals will be achieved, which we have seen uh, clearly missed through the last couple of months with all the omnibus discussions. Now, before we move on, and considering all this information that we just got, we really would like to know how you feel about this proposed delay after all. So we're happy to know if you're more relieved or if you're more frustrated because our credibility as EU is undermined, or maybe you don't have a specific opinion. So I will leave some time for you to answer, but we already see that most of the respondents clicked that they feel frustrated and that credibility is undermined, which makes sense. And we have seen a lot that even companies that understand that this might be a nice, time for them to relax a little bit, it still seems a little bit of a weird turn for EUDR. Of course, 32% of you are also relieved because you need more time. And of course, that's completely okay because EUDR is not the easiest of regulations to comply with. But for sure, the timeline of political events seem to create a little bit of confusion as to the reasons and the credibility of the arguments against it. Now, if we're done with the poll, I will give the floor back to you, Jasper, to continue and tell us more about the issue.
Perfect. Yeah, thanks, Elisavet, for the background. I will now go a bit more into the political process and look a bit more forward. So, what can we expect the next couple of weeks, months, but also perhaps years regarding the delay? And what are the things that we need to look out for? I mean, looking at Brussels, it's a very foggy landscape. It's hard to see through what is happening exactly. So having a bit of an understanding of where the parties stand and what might happen really helps in understanding where this might be going the next couple of weeks. So to give a bit of an overview, first of where we stand today it's really good to mention that this is not even a proposal yet, because it is just a letter from Commissioner Roswell at this time, and it looks like the Commission will pick it up, but that is not certain yet. So as Elisavet has mentioned, also within the Commission, there's kind of disputes going on publicly as well, which means that if it's public, it might get ugly behind closed doors. And we're seeing that now happening, as we speak. But I do think, to be realistic, the Commission will put this forward as a proposal. And if that happens, it will go to the European Parliament, where they will vote and amend. And I think in the amendment section, we might see some pushes by, for example, the EPP to make amendments. And once there's then kind of an amendment to that proposal, it goes on to the European Council, and they then vote and accept it. And the last step, which is more of a formality, is a publication of that proposal in the official journal of the European Union. And then it stops being a proposal and it becomes European law, which then means that the member states, all 27, have to transpose that law into its national law. So that's more or less the process. Now, you might wonder, how long will that take in the next couple of weeks or months? And I mean, the one good thing I think about the delay is that we have a reference point, because they've done this last year. So that's kind of the one good thing that we can take away from this, that we can have an overview of how this might go this time. And what we saw last year is that on the 2nd of October, the Commission proposed their 1-year delay, which means that they kind of published this proposal that they then sent on to the Parliament and the Council. The Council was quick to back a clean delay, so a delay without any amendments and any simplifications. But the Parliament, they had a different opinion on this, so they okayed the delay, but they also added a no-risk category plus a benchmarking kind of amendment. The Council rejected those changes. So they then said, no, we want only a clean text with only a delay and no simplifications. Then they wanted to the trilogue discussions, which is essentially a process wherein the three institutions, so the Council, the Commission, and the Parliament, get together and have a final discussion to have a text that rolls out of it. And out of that then rolled a delay only and no risk text. And I think it's somewhat ironic that they also promised an IT fix. So it's a massive organization with tens of millions of euros to their disposal. A lot of people, you'd think that if they have a delay of a year, and they promise an IT fix, that you wouldn't be sitting here a year later having them talk about another delay because of IT problems. On the 17th and the 18th of December, the European Parliament and the Council adopted the compromise by wide majority. And then on the 23rd of December, the regulation was published and the delay became legally binding. To give a quick note here, the regulation, as you can see, passed all the institutions in less than 2 months. This is really, really impressive. So what we usually see is that this can take up to half a year or even a year, over a year as well sometimes. So I've seen cases where it takes 1.5 years. Just because it's not high in the political agenda or there's a lot of kind of disputes to be resolved. But in this case, it went through really quickly. Also because, of course, if it weren't for the delay, companies would have to start reporting on the 1st of January 2025, and that brings with it the necessary uncertainty. And that situation is exactly the same today. So if the delay is not made official, companies will have to start reporting on the 1st of January 2025. And that also means that if they don't report, they run the risk of having the fines of up to 4% of their turnover. So let's have a look at the politics. I think this is where it gets more interesting because it's a bit more of a discussion on, okay, where do we stand today? What do we see happening in Brussels? And maybe a good disclaimer before we even get into it is that this is all kind of, this is somewhat speculative. So we don't know exactly what's happening behind closed doors. At Coolset, we've been speaking to some of the people close to Brussels, have been speaking to some of the politicians there as well. So we have an indication of what might happen. But of course, until it actually is published and kind of signed by the parties, it could still change. But what we're seeing today is, first of all, a call for public feedback, which was published on July 22nd. Basically, the European Commission launched a call for public feedback on future environmental legislation simplification. So that ran from the 22nd of July until September 10th. And I was looking into the preparation for the webinar, and I was quite shocked actually that they got over 190,000 comments from private individuals all over Europe that left a comment on how they see simplifications. And of course, I didn't go through all the comments, but I kind of clicked through it. And I think the general sentiment was that people were very kind of adamant about protecting these legislations. And some, of course, were in favor of simplification, but practical simplifications, so they wanted to keep the laws in place, but make it practical. Also, on EUDR, there were 7,722 comments explicitly mentioning EUDR. Also here, I did not read all, of course, but the general sentiment here was that they want to have EUDR in place, but some companies were saying, of course, maybe make it a bit more streamlined, maybe simplify it a bit more so that we can actually report on this. Why I'm mentioning this is that there's no official link to EUDR yet in the omnibus territory, but it is a strong signal that it is going there. So the fact that in kind of this public feedback round, over 7,000 comments came in regards to EUDR, it does show, that there is kind of a lot of sentiments regarding the future of this regulation. So on the domain of amendments, what can we expect? As I mentioned already, this delay could open the door for a series of amendments. For example, the EPP, the European People's Party, wants a no-risk category, which would essentially exempt European member states from reporting on EUDR at all. This is quite a problematic amendment because it is, it's not in line with the World Trade Organization rules, as it essentially creates an unlevel playing field. And of course, it also opens kind of these backdoor possibilities for European traders to put products on the European market or export it without having to go through the necessary due diligence. Also, for example, Indonesia wants smallholder exemptions, which would lead to a potential exemption of SMEs. But also good to note here is that on the other side of the coin, you have chocolate makers Nestle, Ferrero, and Tony Chocoloni, which I think we all know are massive conglomerates in the chocolate industry. And they urge the European Commission to ensure the full preservation and swift, ambitious implementation of the EUDR. So on the one hand, we have kind of these big right-wing political parties saying that they want to simplify. On the other hand, we have these big organizations that, they're doing the simplification for, that are saying, no, we want this, we need this, because we do want to work in an industry that combats deforestation, but we do need kind of the political will to be there so that we can have a level playing field. So now let's get into the actual politics. So the visible part of politics takes place in the European Parliament. So the European Commission is officially a place without kind of parties. So of course people do come from certain parties, but once they're in the Commission, they don't represent a party, they don't vote on things. That happens in the European Parliament, where there are 720 seats, all over with people from all over Europe. And essentially, that means that in order to have something passed, you need 361 votes. That said, EUDR is a highly divisive topic, and it will be a close vote. So, as you might have guessed, kind of the next few slides will be on, how might this vote pass, and what group is going to form together to get a possible coalition across the finish line. So first, an overview of the parties that have made a statement. These are the only statements that I found online. The other parties, haven't published one as far as I can tell. So the EPP, the biggest party, has said our efforts have been finally successful. They are really excited about this delay. They also published in their statement that the kind of delay was already fact. Of course, this is also a political game they're playing. They want to present it as fact because they do have that political power, but it is far from fact. It's not even a proposal yet. It's right now, as I mentioned, it is just a letter. Then the S&D, the second biggest party, the Socialists and the Democrats, have said the Commission caves in to lobbyists, and the Greens go a step further and they say, pretending to postpone a law due to IT problems is unprecedented and an insult to all Democrats. And here, I think, if I can share my personal opinion, I do side with the Greens on this, as I do think that, considering that they required companies to report on this, and they have these strict fines, they tell companies to really get it in order. They tell companies also like Coolset that help to prepare these laws that they need to start preparing so that we can support everyone. And then 3 months in advance, they say, actually, you know what, we're going to change the rules mid-game and we're going to delay it again. Does this mean that anyone in the European Commission might have to, give up their seat, as it usually happens in private organizations when someone messes up? I don't think so. So I think, this will be voted on, and they will delay it, as we've seen with other omnibus proposals, and then we'll move on like nothing happened. But I do think that it reduces trust in the European institutions by quite a bit. So a likely coalition. I've looked into this quite a bit, and what I think is a likely coalition going forward is the EPP, the European People's Party, the Patriots for Europe with 84 seats, the European Conservatives and Reformists, and the Europe of Sovereign Nations group with 25 seats. And together they have 375 seats, which is a close coalition of 52% of the votes. So you can see that it is a really close vote. Of course, this doesn't mean that it has to happen this way, but I do see it happening this way. I also spoke a while ago to Jürgen Warborn, who was leading the omnibus proposal process for the EPP. And he also told me back then that, of course, on a different file, but he said, I'm happy to work with the right-wing parties on getting this across. So I think there's kind of a general sentiment of these right-wing parties to stick together on these simplifications. And I think that's also going to be the case here. Good to notice that, for example, last year, Renew Group also voted in favor of the delay, but now has been more kind of on the side of the pro-regulation parties. So I don't expect them to vote per se in agreement with the delay, but it is good to note that there's shifting alignments happening here. So how the process might play out. So I do think we need to watch out for amendments such as changing risk tiers, which we now have the low, medium, and high risk. We also can see SME breaks so that SMEs no longer have to report perhaps, and of course, due diligence simplifications. The Commission wants a clean day change. That's probably what they're going to propose, but they may have to concede. So last year they pushed back on simplifications. I think this year they have a weaker bargaining position and may also be in favor of simplifications. If we look at what Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has said the last couple of months on simplifications, she is a big proponent. So we just have to wait and see. I think in the next 1 or 2 weeks, I hope we get an official statement from the Commission on whether they propose a proposal. I hope that given the timeline, they come forward with this in the next 1 or 2 weeks. Also, Roswell said that she would consult MEPs, some members of European Parliament, and the Council on the different needs for simplification, and did not rule out reopening the rules when she spoke to journalists. And also, if the Commission proposes a delay, the EPP will push for further changes to secure exemptions from member states. They have also said this. So it goes to show that this is not going to be a simple trajectory of proposing a delay, getting it through, accepting it, and then moving on to next year where we all report on the same EUDR. But it kind of opens the door to more changes. that also raises the question, is there a possibility of EUDR being cancelled? I think we have to, at this point, say it's not no anymore. So, Elisavet and I had a lot of discussions about this, and we said, no, it's not a possibility. I do think that possibility is really, really, really small, because it is just not mentioned anywhere. But it is a possibility, of course, considering kind of the amendments. But also why I want to say this is because I want to take away that kind of worry that, all that work is for nothing. Because also the EPP, kind of the big driver behind the simplification, is in favor of simplifications, but not removal. And if we also look at the kind of the big other sustainability regulations that have been simplified and delayed this past year, including CSRD, CSDDD, CBAM, and EU taxonomy, they've all been simplified, but they have not been cancelled. So I think that's kind of where we're going with all of this. And also just here more on a personal note, I think that cancelling after proposing a technical delay twice is the ultimate embarrassment for European institutions. If you want to do something, do it well, do it proactively, work together with European organizations, work together with stakeholders, work together with national governments. Don't do it like this. Don't play a sneaky game of back and forth until one day you just say, okay, now we've waited long enough. It's time to cancel. I don't think that this will be the case. But then again, also with the last couple of omnibus proposal statements, I wouldn't be that surprised anymore. Also, when we look at CSRD, it was already mandatory, and then they suddenly said, you know what, why not delay it by 2 years? That brings us to another poll question. How confident are you that that EU institutions will provide clear guidance in time? Let me put that question live. Yeah, so there's 4 options: very confident, somewhat confident, not confident, and no opinion. Let's see what everyone says. Interesting. So 75% of you have said not confident. And I think that is fair. Yeah, if we look at the last couple of years, if we look at the slides from just now, yeah, that doesn't really scream confidence. So I'm not surprised that this is the sentiment across all of you attending today. Yeah, quickly to go over the options as an in-scope company. So what can you do now going forward? Yeah, where you stand today. So even with the delay, a system setup starting now will take until Q1 2026. Supplier mapping and overview will not be complete before Q2 2026. And simplifications such as a consolidated DDS and risk tiers are possible but uncertain. And essentially, even with simplifications, you still need to map your supply chain. That will not change regardless of any simplification. So that process is likely what will take most time. And the key here is to balance pragmatism with preparation and to avoid over-engineering. So option A is to have reactive compliance. This is where you focus only on the minimum required steps until once the rules apply. The pro here is that you have lower upfront effort if simplifications are adopted, and the con is that you risk incomplete supplier data and rushed DDS filings. That's also what we're seeing now already. Kind of before the delay was announced, you had a lot of companies that we were speaking to, and they were already really, really stressed about the fact that they would have to reach out to their whole supply chain and do so before the deadline. We also spoke, for example, to the NVWA, the Dutch authority for regulating this, and they also said, we see this concern. We're going to make sure that in the first couple of months of the implementation, we're not going to fine these companies. So that also goes to show, even beyond EU reach, the national governments are capable of doing this in a way that works for everyone. It's not always on the European level that this has to be delegated. But to go back to the slide, option A is not necessarily future-proof. So you're vulnerable if the rules tighten or expand. Option B is to have a structured preparation. So you can start now, which means that your system is ready by Q1, your supplier overview is ready by Q2. You can build data flows aligned with Article 9 to 11, which are on information risk and mitigation. And you can use the delay to pilot your DDS submissions, including a consolidated option. The outcome here is a smoother transition, adaptable process under any scenario. And then the last option is future-proof leadership, which is to embed EUDR checks into core procurement and sourcing policies. Starting now is to prepare for all outcomes, either a strict law, a simplified law, or expansion. Benefits here are ready for audits, investor scrutiny, and other markets. And a delay is a chance to test, refine, and show industry leadership. We also know, for example, we've spoken to some people, and they've mentioned that Ahold Delhaize, the company to which Albert Heijn belongs to, a big Dutch supermarket chain, have already started, for example, EUDR preparations in 2024, knowing that it would be delayed. One more question: if the delay is confirmed, how will you adjust your preparations? Pause completely, slow down, continue at the same pace, or accelerate preparations? So we're seeing 47% saying slow down, 41% saying continue at the same pace, 8% of you are pausing, and 8% are accelerating. So that's pretty interesting. It's a bit of a 50-50 split between kind of slowing down and accelerating. And then in the middle, people are continuing at the same pace. So I think it shows also that, there's no clear sentiment that this is going into either direction. And either option is fine as well, So we just want to give you that advice on which options are there. And of course, it is also good to wait the next couple of weeks on what the Commission might say. So how does Coolset cut complexity here? I'll quickly go through these slides. Won't spend too much time here. But yeah, on the one hand, we do full supply chain traceability from farm to customer, which means, for example, we import ERP data through APIs or CSVs, and we automatically and in minutes identify and flag compliance gaps. We engage all of your suppliers, and we collect geospatial data. We do compliant risk assessments every step of the way, which means that we have instant deforestation and legality scoring, fully localized with governments and NGOs. So we have kind of these KPIs, or we have these risk assessments with 100 plus KPIs, where we just go through all of the checks. So all of the legislation, all of the NGO reports, all of the kind of dashboards that are out there, and we map them to our risk assessment. We also mitigate fast when risks arise. So those that have been more familiar with EUDR also know that you need to mitigate risk if they're there. And we automatically open the tickets for at-risk suppliers, and you can follow suggested mitigation steps or take your own corrective actions. So this is a really, kind of a streamlined way to go through the risk assessment and the risk mitigation. You can also auto-generate and post your DDS to EU traces, which allow you to do one-click statements and automatically upload for you. And you can also set up flexible automations. Last but not least, you can stay auto-ready and prevent trading halts. So you can do export. You can export a clean and ready to submit assessment package, of course. And why we're sharing this now after this webinar on delays is also because we're seeing companies that want to continue, even if it is at a slower pace. So, for example, we've had some companies that we've been speaking to, and they said, let's kind of not start with Coolset now, but let's start in Q1, but maybe already start the contract work now, because they say, okay, we want to continue, but we want to continue at a bit slower pace, which gives us a bit more time to prepare. If you want to know more about how we can help or how generally EUDR works, regardless also of a platform solution, we offer one-on-one sessions with our research team. We also offered this in the last webinar and had a couple of interesting conversations with companies. Note that these are non-binding. So we're just happy to help you get started and answer any questions. It also helps us to understand how companies are responding to EUDR. So if that is something that you're interested in, feel free to reach out at eudr@coolset.com. And we can set up a call with you to go through your questions. But for any questions that came into the Q&A now, we're really looking forward to answer those. And I'm really surprised, because usually, Elisavet and I don't have time to go through all of the questions. For now, I only see 2 questions in the Q&A. So if any other questions come up, feel free to ask them here. If not, we'll answer any questions over email if they come in. So one question from Marcel. Let me put it on the screen. We have problems with registering our company in the Traces system. Where can we get support? I think, Elisavet, you're the person to answer this.
Yeah, for sure. So because also as ourselves are part of Traces, we do know that there is a support team. Most probably, if you search online on EU Traces, from the EU website, you're going to see the support line where you can contact them through emails, but we have noticed that the response rate is terribly low, unfortunately. So if I can say, the number one reason I have seen companies not being able to register in Traces is that they are coming from countries like the UK, and in case you don't have an EORI number of yourselves and an EU entity, essentially, you're not going to be able to register any trade in traces. So if that's the case, I hope I have answered your questions. But for any other case, you have to contact them and just be patient and send a lot of emails until they come back to you.
Perfect. And then I have another question here also from Marcel, and I think also for you, Elisavet, as you have worked with EUTR before. So the question is, if EUDR is postponed, will EUTR still be applicable?
Yeah, that's actually a very good question, and we should definitely not confuse EUTR with EUDR, because EUDR has been enforced since 2013, and enforcing it will not enforcing a UTR or not does not play a role for UTR. What we do know for UTR is that in 2028 is going to be altered with EUDR, but until then we have a lot of time and a lot of space for delay. So no, if you are in the timber industry, you still have to do EUDR for all your importing materials. Just different, some smaller, let's say, requirements than EUDR.
Perfect. And now I see some questions coming in. I think we'll answer these two questions, also considering that we are 2 minutes over time. But one question here from Jack, which is quite specific. So Elisavet, I don't know if you have the knowledge to answer this, otherwise we'll get back over email. But the question goes, we have a very unique situation where we provide tires and racing tracks in the EU under a leasing agreement. Does this count as sale and require EUDR?
Yeah, of course. Indeed, you're in a very unique situation, but I think that leasing essentially does not constitute a change of ownership type of commercial activity. So I would be inclined to say no, but I would love to check this further, and maybe me and Jasper can get back to you with an email after we have cross-checked the regulation.
Exactly. Another question from Jill, and I'm going to have to give this again to you, Elisavet, because I know you've been working with some UK companies. We're struggling to register and are based in the UK. What are the plans for this, please?
Yeah, that's why I said that 99% of times that I get this question is from the UK. And the reason is so since UK is not anymore part of the European Union, you're essentially not able to connect to traces, to our understanding, until now at least. So what you do need is you need an operator inside the EU. And in that case, it will be an edge case where we have two first-in-line operators, both you and the one inside the EU that you supply, and they are the ones that have to submit the due diligence statement. At least this is our understanding and our approach so far. And if more information come up, we will know. But for now, I don't think you're going to be able to connect to traces, frankly.
Thanks, Elisavet. And quite exciting that we've had the first webinar where we answered all questions. So that's nice. Also, quick note, I got a comment here from Patrick saying that according to Responsible Investor, EUDR is expected to be part of the omnibus published this autumn. Thanks for that, Patrick. So yeah, we've seen also kind of these rumors that something is coming. We also heard that it's going to be part of the agricultural omnibus in Q4, I believe. So there's kind of a lot of rumors going around. But I mean, Responsible Investor has been a very trustworthy source in the last couple of months. So I do think that this would not be surprising if this indeed happens. If you want to know more, keep following us on LinkedIn, either Coolset account or Elisavet or my accounts personally. We are always publishing kind of the newest updates around this. And for now, I'd like to thank you very much for attending. And if you have any questions, you have our email addresses, jasper@coolset.com or elisavet@coolset.com, or if it's easier, eudr@coolset.com. Thank you so much for your attendance once again, and we hope to see you again soon. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.